You wake up every morning thinking you are safe, but every text you send, every word you speak, every action you think is small, it might be inviting darkness into your life. I know this because I was the one opening those doors. I am not proud of it. My name is Amal from Johannesburg, South Africa, and I was once a witch who destroyed lives for power, without remorse. Until one day, the guilt became unbearable. I remember the first person I attacked, a pastor in Cape Town. He didn't know it, but the words I whispered in secret, the small coded phrases I placed in letters and conversations, slowly brought confusion and doubt into his ministry. I watched his family suffer silently, all because of my work. And I laughed. I believed it was power. But the truth? Power that destroys others destroys you more. The 3 daily things. Let me tell you the truth, 3 things you do daily that unknowingly invite demons. And you must hear this carefully. 1. Careless words. Every time you complain, gossip, or speak out of anger, you are planting seeds. I had a code. The words I targeted, the ones people said without thinking, became my doorways. Words like I hate my life, nothing works for me, why me? These were my favorite keys. I would whisper prayers backwards over their emotions, and watch doors open. Men lost jobs. Women lost peace. Families fell apart. 2. Ignoring spiritual warnings. People think ignoring God, ignoring prayer, or delaying reading the word is harmless. I once attacked a woman from Accra, Ghana. She stopped going to church for months, thinking she was safe. But her home became a battlefield. Every night, shadows whispered in her house. Her children cried alone. I was there, unseen, feeding from that neglect. 3. Invisible agreements. Every time you accept lies, entertainment that glorifies darkness, or participate in covetous conversations, you are silently agreeing. That is how I could target pastors and business owners. I would use their own words, their own small agreements with darkness, to pull them into despair. I saw the fear in their eyes, and I hated myself for enjoying it, but I couldn't stop. Revealing the secret code reflection. And now I reveal it, the secret code of words we witches use. We listen, we echo, we amplify. Words like struggle, impossible, failure, alone. They are keys. Even saying them jokingly can open a door if repeated daily. Pause and think, how often do you say them? Emotional confession as suspense. I have attacked men, women, families, pastors. I cannot undo it. Every night, I prayed for forgiveness. Every night, I trembled, thinking of the souls I touched. And yet, I have seen some recover. Some are stronger. Some are still trapped. One day, I whispered over a small boy, only 8 years old. I was ready to watch him falter, but then, something unusual happened. His mother began to pray with words I could not break. That night, I felt real fear for the first time. That's when I knew, there are forces even I cannot control. And you think that is all? No, those 3 things are just the beginning. Because what you do daily creates patterns, and patterns become access points. Let me continue, because there is something deeper we used to watch, something many of you are doing right now without even realizing it. After years in the dark, I began to notice something strange. There were people we tried to attack, but we could not enter easily. Not because they were perfect. Not because they were always praying. But because they were conscious. And then there were others, people who looked strong, who went to church, who even called themselves believers, yet their lives were wide open to us. One man, a businessman in Kumasi, Ghana, he prayed every Sunday. Everyone respected him. But every night, he sat alone and filled his mind with things that carried darkness. He laughed at them. He normalized them. What he didn't know was this: what you entertain, you invite. We didn't need to fight him. We didn't need rituals. His daily habits were already opening the door for us. Slowly, his peace left him. His business started failing. His marriage became cold. And he kept asking, God, why me? But I was there, and I knew why. You see, demons don't always force their way in. Sometimes, they are welcomed by routine. Let me tell you something that may shock you. There were days we didn't even have to speak spells. We just waited. We listened. We observed your patterns. And once the pattern was consistent, the door stayed open. I remember a young lady in Johannesburg. She was kind. She loved God in her heart. But every day, she spoke negatively about herself. I'm not good enough. I'm always unlucky, nothing good stays with me. At first, nothing happened. But over time, Those words became permission. We began to echo them back into her spirit. What started as thoughts became her reality. She lost opportunities. She pushed away good people. She felt abandoned. And the painful part? She believed it was just life. No, it was not just life. It was access. Do you see it now? This is why I am speaking to you. Yes, you watching this right now. Because some of the things you call normal, we called entry points. Some of the habits you defend, we depended on them. And some of the words you repeat daily, we used them as agreements. There was a night I can never forget. We gathered for an assignment, a pastor and his family. A strong man of God. We expected resistance. But when we observed his home, we found something small, something many of you would ignore. Disunity. Little arguments. Silent anger. Unforgiveness. That was enough. We didn't break the door. The door was already open from inside. That night, I saw something that changed me forever. As we moved closer, ready to strike, his daughter, just a teenager, began to pray. Not perfectly. Not loudly. But sincerely. And suddenly, everything stopped. The atmosphere changed. For the first time in my life as a witch, I felt pushed back. Not by shouting. Not by rituals. But by something pure, something we could not manipulate. That moment, it broke something inside me. Because I realized, light is stronger. But many people are unknowingly choosing darkness in small, daily ways. Listen carefully. It is not always the big sins that open doors. It is the daily habits. The small compromises. The careless words. The silent agreements. And the things you keep repeating, thinking they don't matter. But they do. They always do. Even now, as you are listening to me, there are things you have said today, things you have watched, things you have accepted. And I need you to ask yourself honestly. What doors have I opened today? Because I can tell you this truth. Once a door is opened consistently, something will eventually walk through it. And not everything that enters, comes with peace. I am still carrying the memories of what I did, the people I touched, the lives I altered. Some of them found freedom, but some are still fighting battles they don't even understand. And sometimes, late at night, I still feel like something is watching me. Waiting. Because leaving that life, does not mean it forgets you. There is something else I have not told you yet, something more dangerous than all three things I mentioned. Something many believers are doing every single day, thinking it is harmless. But it is the strongest door of all. I will tell you, but not now. Because if you are already doing it, you need to be ready to hear the truth. And if I tell you now, without preparing your heart, you might reject it. You might even defend it. Because that is how deception works. It hides in what feels normal. Listen, this next thing is not something which is created. It is something people cooperate with. That is why it is so powerful. We used to call it, the silent invitation. It does not look like sin. It does not feel dangerous. In fact, many of you think it is just part of life. But to us, it was the strongest open door. I remember a man in Pretoria. Strong, disciplined, respected. He didn't speak negative words. He avoided bad company. He even prayed sometimes. So we watched him closely. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. And then we saw it. Every night, before he slept, he allowed his mind to wander. Not in prayer. Not in peace. But in worry, fear, imagination of problems that had not even happened yet. He would lie there and build scenarios in his mind. What if I lose everything? What if something happens to my family? What if I fail? And slowly those thoughts became pictures. And those pictures became doors. You see, your mind is not empty space. It is a gate. What you allow to stay there forms a reality in the spirit before it ever shows in your life. We didn't need to touch him. His own thoughts were already building a path for us. Day by day, his fear grew. Sleep left him. Peace disappeared. Confusion entered. And then we stepped in. Not forcefully but legally. Because he had been opening the door every night. Do you understand what I am saying to you? Some of you are not under attack because of what you do outside. But because of what you allow inside your mind. This is deeper than words. Deeper than actions. This is agreement at the level of thought. And once that agreement is strong, it becomes very difficult to break. I remember the day everything changed for me. We were sent to a family in Durban. A peaceful home. No obvious weakness. No careless words. No visible sin. We stayed hidden, waiting. watching. But days passed, and we could not enter. It frustrated us. Until one night something small happened. The father came home angry. Not shouting. Not violent. Just silent anger. He sat down. Said nothing. Ate in silence. Slept in silence. And that silence carried something. Unforgiveness. Bitterness. That was all we needed. Because silence can speak louder than words in the spirit. That night we gained access. And slowly that home changed. Arguments started. Distance grew. Love became cold. And they never knew, it started with something so small. That is when the guilt began to eat me alive. Because I realized, we were not always the cause. Sometimes, we were just the result of doors people opened themselves. And that truth, it broke me. Because it meant, people were suffering not just because of darkness. But because of what they didn't know. What they ignored. What they allowed daily. Even now, as I speak. There are patterns in your life you have not questioned. Things you repeat every day. Thoughts you entertain every night. Feelings you hold onto without releasing. And you think they are harmless. But I am telling you, they are not harmless. They are invitations. And the more consistent they are, the wider the door becomes. There is something else, something we used to wait for patiently. Something that, once it appears in a person's life, makes everything easier for darkness to operate. It is not fear. It is not sin. It is something more subtle. Something many of you are already feeling, even now. And once it settles in your heart, it does not just open the door. It keeps it open. I will explain it, but you need to look at yourself first. Because if you already have it, then what you are dealing with right now is not ordinary. It is called spiritual numbness. Not weakness. Not ignorance. Numbness. That state where you no longer feel conviction. Where wrong things don't trouble you anymore. Where prayer feels like a burden. Where you say, I'll do it later, and later never comes. That is the most dangerous place a person can be. Because when you are afraid, you can still cry out. When you are struggling, you can still fight. But when you are numb, you don't even realize what you've lost. I remember a woman in Accra. She was once on fire for God. She prayed, she fasted, she helped others. We tried to touch her many times, but we failed. So we changed strategy. We didn't attack her directly. We distracted her. Little by little. She became busy. Then tired. Then careless. Prayer reduced. The word became occasional. Her sensitivity slowly faded. Until one day, she did something she would have never done before. And she didn't even feel it. That was the moment we entered. No resistance. No struggle. Just an open door. That is what numbness does. It removes your alarm system. And once that is gone, anything can walk in. I am telling you this because I have seen it too many times. Strong men becoming weak. Pure hearts becoming cold. Families losing what once held them together. Not suddenly, but slowly, quietly, daily. You don't wake up one day and everything is gone. It slips, one habit at a time. One thought at a time. One compromise at a time. And before you realize it, you are standing in a place you never thought you would reach. Even now, there are some of you watching me. You still believe you are in control. You still think, it's not that serious. But deep inside, something is telling you otherwise. That small voice. That discomfort. That is the part of you that is still awake. Do not ignore it. Because the moment you silence it completely, the door does not just open. It becomes a pathway. And pathways are dangerous, because they don't close easily. There is one last thing I need to say, and I have been holding it back. Because this is where everything connects. The words you speak. The things you entertain. The thoughts you allow. The numbness you ignore. They all lead to one final state. A state where a person can be surrounded by light. And still remain in darkness. I have seen people sit in church. Lift their hands. Say the right words. And yet, they were completely accessible to us. Not because God was not there. But because their hearts were elsewhere. Divided. And a divided heart is an open door. That is the truth many people don't want to hear. You cannot live in two directions and expect to remain protected. It does not work like that. And I know this, because I used to take advantage of it. Even now, there are people you admire, people you think are strong. But if you could see what is happening in the spirit, you would understand why some battles never seem to end. I am still learning, still seeking forgiveness, still trying to undo what I can. But there are nights. Nights when I feel that same presence. Watching. Waiting. As if something is expecting me to return. And sometimes, I hear whispers. Not outside. But close. Very close. Calling me by the name I used before I left that life. That is how I know. Some doors I opened back then. They were never completely closed. And if that is true for me, then you need to ask yourself something very serious. What about the doors in your own life? Are they truly closed? Or have they just been quiet, waiting for the right moment to open again? They don't always rush in, that is what many people don't understand. Sometimes, they wait. They study your patterns. They learn your weak moments. They watch when you are tired, when you are emotional, when you stop paying attention. That is when they move. There was a man in Soweto, very disciplined, very focused. For a long time, we could not find a way in. Until something happened. He lost someone close to him. The pain was real. The grief was deep. And at first, he tried to stay strong. But slowly, he began to withdraw. He stopped talking to people. He stopped praying. He kept everything inside. And that silence, that isolation, became a door. We didn't create his pain. But we used it. That is another truth you must understand. Not every attack begins with darkness. Sometimes it begins with pain that is not handled the right way. Pain can either push you closer to light, or leave you exposed in the dark. And when it is not released, it becomes a hiding place for something else. I remember the exact night we entered his life. He sat alone, staring into nothing, replaying memories, asking questions that had no answers. And then he said it quietly. I can't do this anymore. That sentence, that moment, was all we needed. Because words spoken in deep emotion carry weight. They are not just sounds, they are agreements. And once that agreement was made, everything became easier. His thoughts changed. His behavior shifted. His strength weakened. And people around him started saying, he's not the same anymore. They were right. He wasn't. Because something had entered and settled. Do you see how this works now? It is not always dramatic. It is not always obvious. It is subtle. It hides in your daily life. In your reactions. In your private moments. In the things no one else sees. That is why I am speaking to you like this, directly. Because this is not a story you just listen to and forget. This is something you must examine in your own life. Right now. Think about today. What did you say when you were frustrated? What did you allow into your mind when you were alone? What did you feel and refuse to release? These are not small things. They are signals. And once those signals repeat, they form a pattern. And patterns attract attention. Even now. There are some of you, you have been experiencing things you cannot explain. Strange heaviness. Unusual fear. Cycles that don't break. You pray, but something still feels off. Let me tell you why. Because prayer without awareness can leave doors open. You cannot pray one moment, and then spend the rest of your day opening the same doors again. It does not work that way. Consistency matters. Awareness matters. What you do daily matters. There was a time I thought once someone prayed, we could never touch them again. I was wrong. Because many people pray, but they do not guard what comes after. And what comes after is where access is either closed or reopened. I am not saying this to make you afraid. I am saying this so you can be awake. Because once you are aware, everything changes. The words you choose, the thoughts you allow, the habits you keep, they begin to shift. And when that happens, doors begin to close. Not instantly, but gradually. The same way they were opened. But listen. There is still something I have not fully explained. Because everything I have told you so far, these are just the ways doors are opened. But there is something else. Something that determines whether what enters your life will stay, or be forced out. And this is where many people lose the battle completely. Because they think once something enters, there is nothing they can do. That is not true. But what you must do, most people are not willing to do it. And that is why, even when they realize something is wrong, it continues. Stronger. Deeper. More difficult to break. If you are still watching, then you are ready to hear it. But before I say it, ask yourself one honest question. Are you truly ready to close every door? Or are there some things you are still not willing to let go? Because this is where everything becomes serious. Closing doors is not just about knowing the truth. It is about giving something up. And that is where many people stop. They want peace. They want protection. They want freedom. But they don't want to release the habits, the thoughts, the emotions that are keeping those doors open. I have seen it again and again. A woman cries, "I want my life back." But she keeps speaking the same negative words every day. A man prays for breakthrough. But he refuses to let go of anger and pride. A family seeks peace. But they hold on to silent bitterness. You cannot hold the key to the door and still expect it to remain closed. At some point, you must drop it. I remember when I was trying to leave that life. It was not easy. People think once you decide, everything just stops. No. There were nights I felt pulled back. Dreams that felt too real. Voices that sounded familiar. A strange pressure, like something was demanding my return. And I realized something very important. Leaving darkness is not just a decision. It is a fight. A real fight. Because what you have entertained, what you have agreed with, what you have repeated, does not leave quietly. It resists. That is why many people try to change, and then go back. Not because they are weak, but because they did not understand the battle. When you begin to close doors, you will feel it. Some habits will pull harder. Some thoughts will become louder. Some emotions will feel stronger than before. It will look like things are getting worse. But that is not failure. That is resistance. I wish someone told me that earlier. Because there was a time I almost gave up. I thought, maybe this is just who I am. But deep inside, there was still something fighting, something refusing to surrender completely. And that is what saved me. Listen carefully. As long as there is still a part of you that resists darkness, you are not finished. You are not trapped. You are not beyond help. But you must act. Not tomorrow. Not when you feel ready. Now. Because delay is another door. We used to depend on it. People would say, "I'll change later. I'll fix it tomorrow. I'll deal with it soon." And while they waited, the door stayed open. And what entered became comfortable. Do you understand? Time does not close doors. Action does. Consistency does. Awareness does. There is something else, something very few people realize. Even after you close a door, you must guard it. Because once something has had access to your life, it remembers the way. It remembers your patterns. It remembers your weak moments. And sometimes, it comes back. Not the same way. Not the same form. But with a different approach. More subtle. More patient. I have seen people break free, only to fall again. Because they thought the battle was over. It is not over. Not yet. Even now, as I speak, there are some of you, you are beginning to recognize things in your life. Patterns you ignored. Habits you defended. Thoughts you normalized. And something inside you is saying, "This is true." Do not silence that voice. Because that is where change begins. But let me warn you. Once you become aware, you cannot go back to ignorance. You will start seeing things differently. You will notice what you didn't notice before. You will feel what you didn't feel before. And that can be uncomfortable. But it is necessary. Because awareness is the beginning of closing every door. There is still one more layer, one final truth I have not fully spoken about. And this one separates those who truly become free from those who keep going in circles. Because it is not just about what you stop doing. It is about what you replace it with. If you remove darkness and leave the space empty, something else will come. That is a law many people ignore. An empty space does not stay empty for long. So the real question is not just, what doors have I opened? But also, what am I filling my life with now? Because whatever fills that space will determine what stays, and what has no choice but to leave. I will explain this. But you need to understand something first. Because if you get this part wrong, you may think you have closed the door, while in reality, it is still slightly open. Because a door does not need to be wide open. Even a small gap is enough. And that is where many people make the final mistake. They try to change everything at once, but they leave one thing behind. One habit. One thought pattern. One hidden behavior. And that one thing becomes the gap. I have seen it too many times. A man stops speaking negatively, but keeps entertaining fear in his mind. A woman stops certain habits, but holds on to unforgiveness deep inside. A believer prays, but still feeds on things that weaken their spirit. And because of that small opening, the cycle continues. Not as strong as before, but still present. Still active. Still waiting. Listen. When I finally left that life, I thought it was over. But one night, I had a dream. Not an ordinary dream. I found myself standing in a place I recognized, a place from my past. And there was a door in front of me. Closed, but not completely. There was a small space, just enough to see darkness behind it. And then I heard a voice. Not loud. Not aggressive. Calm. You didn't close it fully. I woke up shaking. Because I understood immediately. There were still things in my life I had not surrendered completely. Small things I thought didn't matter. But they mattered. That was the day I made a final decision. No half measures. No hidden corners. No secret agreements. Everything had to go. And that is when I began to feel something I had not felt in a long time. Peace. Real peace. Not temporary relief. Not emotional comfort. But deep, steady peace. The kind that does not shake easily. And do you know why? Because when doors are truly closed, there is nothing left for darkness to hold on to. But listen carefully. Closing the door is not the end. It is the beginning of something else. Because once that space is free, you must fill it with light. With truth. With discipline. With consistency. Because what you build after closing the door is what keeps it shut. Now I am speaking directly to you. Not as a witch anymore, but as someone who has seen both sides. Today, watch your words. Guard your mind. Break unhealthy patterns. Release what you have been holding on to. Do not delay. Do not ignore. Do not pretend it is nothing. Because the small things, they are never small. They are doors. And every day, you are either opening them or closing them. The choice is yours. But before I go, there is something you must understand, something I cannot ignore. Even after everything I have told you, even after you begin to close those doors, there are still deeper things, hidden things. Things that don't come from your habits, but from places you never expected. And those ones, they require a different kind of battle entirely. I will share that. But only if you are truly ready to go deeper.